And welcome in to Pressbox Live. I'm Stan the Fan, along with my co-host Gary Stein. And at least temporarily right now, we're using StreamYard, I think it's called, instead of Zoom. But our guest tonight is somebody we're very fond of talking to any time of year, but especially this time of year. And that's Ken Zalis, one of the foremost experts on fantasy football. KZ, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. We had a normal Sunday this past week, and things are great. It's good to have football back.
All right. It is good to have football back. I'm just curious to get started here. Let's go from sort of after the draft, which we all saw, in a new way, shape, and form. It was done essentially virtually. Football never really picked up. There were none of the training camps and on that kind of stuff. No preseason football. How's it been? Do you think all of this? How's that been received out in the real world?
So, as far as the real world, everybody was thrilled to have football back this past Sunday,
Yeah,
but it was weird. It was, I've been doing this, for 20 years as far as the fantasy football goes. And after the draft, you start to cover rookie camp and see how the rookies look for the first time. And then you start to look at OTAs and see how, the depth chart's starting to look. And then you go to training camp and you learn even more from preseason games. And all that got wiped out. And the coverage, even from the mini training camp that the team had. I mean, they only had 10 padded practices, and we really didn't know anything. And it was really, the fantasy football world, the draft still went on when the drafts went on.
right.
I start drafting on July 4th. We have an Independence Day draft that we broadcast on XM radio. We still did that. We had no idea what to expect from the rookies. We don't know if anybody was hurt coming into these camps or anything like that, or coming out of the draft. It was very secretive. So it was really strange, and it was really one of the more challenging off seasons that we've ever had to deal with.
That's sort of what I was alluding to. So how in the blind were you? You're considered one of the top 10 experts in this game across the country, and that's quantifiable through results you've had over the last 10, 12 years. How was it flying blind, so to speak?
Well, you start to learn over the years things like draft capital and what it means when the LA Rams, who don't have a first round pick, move up and take a running back. And that means they really thought that they needed a running back because Todd Gurley wasn't in town, and they
Right.
felt the rest of the roster, that's what they needed. When you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, and they win the Super Bowl, but then they take a running back in the first round, or a lot of these teams took wide receivers in the first round. You start to think, well, they're not going to sit on them. They take first, they spend that capital because it's a piece they thought they were missing. And then you just really, you get to learn who really has the information that covers the team well. You look, at Baltimore, and you go to a guy that's been around the team for a long time, like Jeff Zrebeck, and you
Right.
say, okay, he's really got his ear to what everybody's doing. And there's a guy like Jeff in every town. You just have to find who that is, and you kind of read the tea leaves and read their reports. That's the only thing you could really do with these. You look at Indianapolis with Jonathan Taylor, and the coaching staff always said, Jonathan Taylor's a rookie. We really, really like him, but Marlon Mack is our starter. You look at what happened week one; they were telling the truth. Unfortunately, Marlon
Yeah.
Mack gets hurt and's gone for the year. But
Yep.
Marlon Mack, I mean, Jonathan Taylor didn't have a touch until Marlon Mack got hurt. So, you start to learn who to trust, which coaches tell you the truth, which coaches just give coach speak, and you try to figure out your way. You're the blind man in the lit room trying to feel your way around.
Hey, Ken, just from a holistic standpoint, when you look at the fantasy landscape, you and I and Stan, for that matter, have been in the same league now for like the last, what, 6 or 7, 8 years or so. I'm not playing this year. I had a conversation with you about a month ago saying that my heart really wasn't in it this year. I know Stan's playing, but I'm not 100% sure that his heart is in it. My question is, what have you seen overall in terms of participation? Are you surprised by maybe some people not wanting to participate this year, or what's going on in your mind right now?
All my leagues are full, and I'm in 22 of them. So I don't really. I think there are people who didn't want to play because they didn't have the typical preseason, and they felt like they didn't want to spend the time. They really weren't into it. I mean, I was one of those people with baseball this year. I played baseball fantasy. It's the first year I haven't played fantasy baseball since 1985.
Hmm.
But my heart wasn't in it. And like you with football, my heart wasn't in it. I had no idea who was on any team. I didn't pay attention to anything once the training camp stopped, the preseason stopped for spring training, and so I just didn't want to get into it for a shortened season. There are people I am sure around that just didn't want to do it, but I had, there was one league, it's a 16 team league. I had 10 teams drop out, but I had those 10 filled within 2 days, and it was a paid league. So I think that there's plenty to go around. You look at the numbers that DFS, Daily Fantasy Sports, did in week one. I mean, they were through the roof. People were eager to get back to football, and things like that. So I don't really think it hurt too much. I'd say less than a 10% drop, if anything. But
Hmm.
there was nothing different about the quote unquote draft season, as far as drafting fantasy leagues, that from any other year.
Ken, let me ask you, injuries are always a concern, no matter, if it's a normal quote unquote season or not. Obviously, you never know who's going to go down, but somebody will. But in a situation like this year, where the practices were limited, there were no preseason games, hitting was limited, etc., there's probably going to be a rash, and we already started to see it in week one, of what they call soft tissue injuries, hamstrings, pulls, strains, sprains, etc., things like that, etc. Um, going into the season with the strategies that you have, and I know you go running back heavy, do you or would you agree that you may even want to go more running back heavy this year because of the advent of potentially with injuries or soft tissue injuries?
Well, you have to fill all your positions. So, I mean, I don't know. I like to get 5 or 6 running backs on my roster. If that's on a 16, round draft, it's kind of tough to go any heavier than that. Maybe 7. My strategy this year, and we talked about it in the pages of Pressbox and PressBoxOnline.com. I wanted people that were healthy. I wanted to an extent avoid situations that were murky. For example, in Denver, okay, they had Melvin Gordon and
Right.
Philip Lindsay. Now Philip Lindsay is a little injured right now, but going into the season, I had knocked Gordon down because I thought that they were going to share the ball a whole lot. I don't have a ton of shares of Jonathan Taylor because I thought that was going to be a timeshare. I didn't draft guys that I knew were already hurt. If you already have a hamstring issue, there's no reason for me to draft that player, because it's just going to linger, because there really has not been any time um, to really get in football shape. As in shape is one thing, in football shape, the cutting and the game speed are two different things. There were some suggestions, and I did this in all the leagues that I run, that you had a deeper draft, meaning if you usually did 16 rounds, you do 18 rounds this year. If you never had IR spots, or you only had one, you doubled the IR spots, or put 2 on there, because we were going to have these issues, and we've seen them after one
and
week.
and that would allow you to, I just want to be clear, that would allow you to keep the player, not have to give him up when you pick
Correct.
somebody else up. Okay.
Correct. I mean, in a situation, you look at week one where you have Michael Thomas, wide receiver one in fantasy football. He's going to miss, depending on who you listen to, he may miss up to a month or longer with a high ankle sprain. If you're a short bench, you may not be able to keep Michael Thomas. That would be a shame to do that in this year of fantasy, especially. George Kittle has a knee issue. We
Right.
saw running backs go down already. Luckily, we didn't see any quarterbacks really go down. But you're gonna have to. It fantasy this year. You're gonna have to really judge how hurt somebody is, and can you afford to keep them on either IR or on your bench for 4 or 5 weeks, or do you have to drop them and make a decision like that? So I think the leagues that really thought ahead about that. We're playing on giving everybody a more even playing field this year because this is not unexpected and this is going to continue. We're going to see major injuries every single week, unfortunately, this year in football.
KZ, one of the things I've noticed, I've played fantasy baseball since 1985, and I find that one of the toughest things the older I've gotten is figuring out not whether I want a player really, but what that player's role is going to be on the team. And I find like Kevin Cash in baseball to be almost impossible to figure out who he's going to play. Take a situation like the Ravens where they've got Mark Ingram, they've got the Gus Edwards, they got Justice Hill, and then they have now Dobbins. I mean, is it almost that those players are guys you're going to pass on because you can't figure out who's going to get the role, or do you have ways that are far superior to mine to figure out who's going to get the important role you need played?
Well, I think you have to go to situations. You have to look at, let's just take the Ravens, for example. They drafted J.K. Dobbins in the second round.
Right.
You don't draft a running back in the second round if you're the Ravens if you don't have a plan to use them.
Yeah, sure.
Now, in a fantasy draft, you have to judge, okay, you have the Ravens, they run the ball more than any other team in the NFL. They have Ingram, who broke down last year as the year went on, so they're going to want to keep him a little bit healthier. They have Gus Edwards, which for some reason they didn't look like they liked him a whole lot in the playoffs because they just decided to stop running him.
But not to interrupt you, but I have to. They run the ball more than everybody, but the quarterback runs the ball more than the running backs.
Yeah, but I mean, you look at the number of carries and the number of times that they throw the ball. They want to run the ball. They want to be a power running team first. Now, I think you look at histories with offensive coordinators, but in the case of Justice Hill, they haven't found a role for him yet within this offense. So you say, okay, well, how many touches a week do you think that Ravens running backs will run the ball? And if the number I always come up with is 35 preseason. Okay, well, how many of those does Dobbins get? If he gets 15 of those 35, he becomes what we call flex worthy because he has enough touches. And the way I've always done fantasy football, to me, it's always about targets and touches. Who is getting the ball thrown their way and who is getting the ball in their hands more often from the running back position. Somebody that gets the ball 5 times but has a 5 yards, an average is fantastic, but it doesn't do anything for fantasy versus the guy that touches the ball 20 times but has a 4-yard average. That 4-yard average is going to get you more points. So, you just kind of have to piece that together this year. And it was tough. I mean, I basically said, everybody, we saw what Clyde Edwards-Helaire did in week 1. It was fascinating. 25 touches out of the running back position, no targets in the passing, but Kansas City running backs didn't rush the ball 25 times the entire year last year. So it was like everybody wanted to take this guy early, and I'm like, I don't know how many times he's going to touch the ball. He was further down in my rankings. For 1 week, I'm totally wrong on that. But we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes as the season goes on. But, it was a really tough year to do the rankings. I think as we talked with other fantasy experts, everybody felt it. And it's why I've always said to take running backs early, because running backs, A, they get injured more than any other position, and B, they touch the ball more than any other position. You had to make sure this year you got enough running backs on your roster that you felt comfortable and you could handle an injury that was going to come. And we already saw, 4 running backs go down in week 1 to different severities. Marlon Mack's out for the year. Le'Veon Bell's on IR, which is just a 3-week thing this year. We got a turf toe in Lindsey already. It's a minefield this year is the way we're describing it.
So getting back to just the Ravens, for example, would you stop at either taking Ingram or Dobbins, and then Edwards and Hill would be of no interest to you at this
Yeah, Edwards
time?
and Hill were of no interest. They went undrafted in many, many leagues.
Yeah.
Edwards in only the deepest of leagues where you maybe had 20 rounds of drafting. But it's Dobbins and Ingram. I mean, even week 1, what we learned was they're going to split carries.
Yeah.
I know Dobbins got the 2 touchdowns in week 1, but they were within 2 carries of each other. Game script kind of said, "Oh, let's run the rookie. No reason to have the veteran continue in a 25-point blowout at the time." So I think that's going to be a split. I still think Ingram's the better guy for this year, especially in the first probably 6 weeks. We'll see where that goes. And maybe as Dobbins gets more and more comfortable with the offense and the team becomes more and more comfortable with his knowledge of the offense, we may see a changing of the guard somewhere. But early on, it's going to be Ingram.
Hey, KZ, while we're talking about the Ravens, let's stay with them real quick. As far as rankings are concerned, I guess most people would have, Kelsey from Kansas City. I'm talking about tight ends now. Kelsey for Kansas City, Kittle if he's healthy, San Francisco, etc. Where did you have Mark Andrews ranked this year?
Third. He was third. He was third the whole time. It's Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews, and Ertz in most leagues were the way it went. And most people probably would tell you that Kelsey and Kittle were a clear tier 1, and Andrews and Ertz were the clear tier 2, but that Andrews was clearly at this point ahead of Ertz. The thing with Ertz is that you had, and we saw it week 1, I was really high and always have been on Dallas Goedert.
Yeah.
He had a huge first week. I don't expect him to do that every week, but you're talking about a team that during the draft process, we had no idea what wide receivers were healthy. So it's like we knew we were going to see a lot of 2 tight end sets. So I think that made most fantasy experts give Edwards the nod. And with Hurst leaving town for the Ravens, you expected Andrews to snap count to go way up, and we saw that in week 1. Last year, it's amazing how productive he was with the limited snaps that he was on the field. But that's Lamar's favorite target. And I know he likes Brown, and we've been heard in the offseason was how good Brown looked, and he looked fantastic Sunday. But Andrews is his guy. That's look 1.
Right. So staying with that, speaking of Brown, you're talking about Hollywood Brown. Yep. Could he be another Tyreek Hill, or is he a different player?
I think he can be similar to him. Tyreek Hill's been really, really good, so I'm really hesitant to compare the two. And the offenses are so different. The Ravens are run first, KC is pass first. But and we haven't really seen Brown healthy. He looked fantastic Sunday, but by the Ravens' admission and his own admission, he wasn't healthy at all at any point last year and couldn't really push off of his foot. So he could be. I mean, he's got that kind of speed. He's got a quarterback that trusts him. I'm looking forward to seeing him. It was one of those things, a lot of people were really high on him, and I kept saying, I don't know how many opportunities he's going to have per week. Now, you look at week 1, he had 5 balls thrown at him. He caught all 5 for 100 yards, but that's rare. I mean, he's not going to catch 100% of his targets. His target share, for him to be a Tyreek Hill type, he's got to get a bigger target share than 5 every week.
KZ, a couple quarterbacks that I think are facing very interesting seasons this year. Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, who has that gigantic contract next year that would pay him, I believe, over $40 million next year. And that's one of the reasons that they drafted a quarterback. And I forget, Gary, who was it?
Jordan Love.
Jordan Love. And then Cam Newton, who goes to New England. And I maintain that Josh McDaniels had all this extra time during the pandemic to sit around and envision what having a more athletic quarterback could do for his ability to call plays. Do you find those two guys very interesting in the quarterback position? Because I have a sense that Rodgers is ticked off that he knows this is probably his last year in Green Bay, and he's really going to play at a very high level.
Well, I mean, the demise of Aaron Rodgers obviously was very premature. He can still play. Aaron Rodgers had a good year last year.
I know that.
They just didn't ask him to throw the ball as much as they normally do last year, and they ran it a whole bunch, and they ran it very successfully. Aaron Rodgers showed you in week 1 exactly what he can do, and he can still throw the football, and he's got one of the best wide receivers in football in Devontae Adams to throw it to. Plus, with the run game, it makes him really, really dangerous. Look, he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's come out and said it. He was not happy about them drafting Jordan Love. You have this quarterback, like you said, that the team, owes a lot of money to, played at a good level. They went 13-3 last year, and you drafted his replacement instead of getting him some help. And then even worse is that instead of taking a wide receiver next, you took another running back, and A.J. Dillon from Boston College. So he's going to play a chip on his shoulder. He may be auditioning the entire year for his next team.
That's exactly what I'm
in that direction. I'm not a big Jordan Love person, so I don't know how that's going to play out. We'll find out at the end of this year. It's going to be real hard to get rid of Aaron Rodgers if he keeps on playing like he did in week 1 and he continues to win football games. Cam Newton, I'm still waiting and seeing. And the reason I say this is Cam Newton did not throw the ball well this past Sunday. He threw for 150 yards. Now, he looked great running. He ran the ball 11 times. He ran for 2 touchdowns. When we're dealing with fantasy, you can't count on that every week from a running quarterback unless you're Lamar Jackson. We got used to that. We have data on that. We haven't seen a healthy Cam for a couple of years. Now, New England signed him late, so I don't know about the whole Josh McDaniels had all season to create this. The only thing Josh McDaniels had was a year with Tim Tebow, and if he wants to treat the running side of it similar with the way he did with Tebow, he's got an offensive playbook already built for Cam Newton if he's going to treat him like that. But I have to see Cam Newton throw the football a little bit better. Now, I know New England still does not have the greatest weapons in the world.
Yeah, how's his receiving core?
Well, I mean, you have Julian Edelman, who's still Julian Edelman. N'Keal Harry is a guy that N'Keal Harry is a guy that would really like, that they really like, just hasn't been healthy, really hasn't done it. And then they don't have a whole bunch else. Yeah. 2 rookie tight ends. Tom Izzo's more of a blocking guy. They have James White out of the backfield who can catch the ball, but they don't have a whole lot. So it'll be interesting to watch Cam Newton this year. I think everybody's really, really excited. I'm excited. The NFL is more fun
Right.
when
If
Cam
Cam
Newton's
Newton,
playing well.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to see him and how he throws the ball before we say how excited we're going to be about him at the quarterback position.
Hey, Casey, let me give you one more quarterback before I ask you an overall question. Hopkins, D. Hopkins now in Arizona. How do you see Kyler Murray? Is he a Lamar Jackson light type player?
I think he can be. He looked great. He made a Lamar Jackson run this past Sunday, and rushed for 100 yards. And, he now has one of the 5 best wide receivers, if not the 3 best wide receivers in football in Hopkins, which, you see how smart the team all of a sudden became in the passing game when Hopkins comes to town. All of a sudden, oh, look, we can throw him 14 times and he's going to catch a lot of balls. Makes everybody better around him. Kyler Murray is that guy that I think can take the next step. He showed flashes last year. He showed that he can be accurate. They improved the offensive line around him. They have 2 really good running backs. And you look at that and say, yeah, he can do it. Now, last year it seemed like he was really hesitant to run the football. This year, after one game, he did great things running the football, and was essentially the leading rusher in the NFL for week 1 before he took 2 steps back and kneeled a couple of times at the end of the game. But yeah, he has Lamar tendencies. I don't think he's the thrower that Lamar is, and I know that seems weird to say because the everybody nationally wants to tell us how he's just a running back playing quarterback, and you didn't watch him in college if that was the case. But we'll see. I mean, the great thing that Arizona did is they went out and got him a weapon, and that can make all the difference in the world sometimes.
Casey, let me ask you an overall fantasy philosophy question. Because football is such a system game, you've got so many players on the field at one time interacting with one another more than any other sport. It's a game of systems. When a player changes teams, a free agent, they go to a new team for the first year. I'm not singling out a player. I'm just talking philosophically.
Right.
Because football is such a system game, do you shy away? Like, how do you rank? How do you manage expectations for a player going to an absolutely new system?
Well, you do look at what they have around them and how are they going to fit in with the overall team. I'll give you an example, and we'll stay with the quarterback, and we'll even throw rookie in there. Joe Burrow was the number 1 overall pick, and he goes to a Cincinnati team that statistically wins and losses was not very good last year. But you look at him and you say, if you look at all the weapons he has around him, AJ Green's healthy, Tyler Boyd's coming into his own, Joe Mixon looked like the best running back in football for the last 6 weeks. You look at that and say, you know what? They drafted T. Higgins. He's gone into a really good situation that he can grow into. And I think that's the important thing. Joe Burrow is going to put up good fantasy numbers this year because he has talent around him. You look at guys that go to different situations. Tom Brady. Look, it's a new system. He's 43 years old, and he looked absolutely terrible week 1. He's going to be okay because he has good people around him, and he has good skill positions around him as long as he's, able to throw the football at age 43. There are people that think he's done. I don't think he's quite done, but he's got a lot of talent around him. People are going to write him off. So you have to look, like you said, because it does rely so much on the people around you that, you have to look at the situation. Hopkins is a perfect example. They play a 5 wide receiver set. So you can't double Hopkins in that situation. And if you do double him, guess what? The entire middle of the field is open and Kyler Murray just takes off. So, I'll take Hopkins over and just about any quarterback in the league 101 because of his size and his ability to go get the ball. So you look in that situation and say, okay, he's not going to get 150 targets like he did in Houston, but he's going to get 125. You know, that you're talking about a team that runs more offensive plays than any other team
Yeah,
in the NFL.
they
So
play.
there's the opportunity is there, and
Yeah.
that's where I always go back to. Where's the opportunity?
The trade of DeAndre Hopkins was certainly the biggest of the offseason, I believe. But equally or close to equally was the trade of Stephon Diggs from Minnesota to Buffalo. How much does he change the needle or move the needle there with hopefully an improving Josh Allen there?
Yeah, I don't know, and we'll see. And the reason I don't know is because that's a weird offense, and it's an evolving offense. Josh Allen, very similar. I keep on coming back to Lamar Jackson, but relied on his legs a lot last year. They drafted a running back in Zach Moss, and they have Devin Singletary. They want to run the ball a lot. They have a guy that in Brown. There's I know he's not the same player as Diggs. Diggs is a better player, but
Mm-hmm.
they run similar route trees. They both run similar route trees, so they're a little bit redundant. And then you have Josh Allen who's going to run the ball probably 5 to 7 times a game. So I think he moves it a little bit because it gives you that second threat. But I don't think that he moves it enough in that offense. I think when you talk about the fantasy aspect, I think he's does more for the team in real football than he
Mm-hmm.
does as a fantasy asset.
Okay.
I think as a fantasy asset, when he was with Minnesota, he was a solid, what we would call wide receiver too. He was one of the top 24 that we would want every week, on our fantasy team. I don't think he gets there this year consistently with Buffalo. He may be a wide receiver 3 or a wide receiver 4, depending on the particular week and the matchup and things like that. So
But he
I
makes the team. But he
he
makes
makes
the
the
team.
team better. I don't know that his fantasy production will get. I think he takes a hit in his fantasy production, if anything.
Hey, let me ask you just a general question, and I'll give Gary time to ask you a couple more, and then we'll close things out. But I do want to ask you, you write for PressBoxOnline.com. Your day job is the athletic director, assistant athletic director at Friends School. How can people interact with you if they have questions for you, Casey?
The best place is Twitter at Fans Fantasy on Twitter. You can direct message me. You can tweet me. I answer everything. And if I didn't answer you, that means I didn't see it. And please send it to me again. This is what I do. I've been doing it for a long time. I don't mind doing it. You may late in the day on a Sunday get my look at my rankings reply, but I'll reply
Yep.
it to you. But I'll answer everything. That's the best way. You can get me on Facebook. I don't check that as much. I just post things there mostly for people to see. But that's at
But
Fans
at
Fantasy is the absolute best way to get me.
So at Twitter, at Fans Fantasy, does it have
Correct.
an apostrophe or just FANS?
Just FANS Fantasy.
Fantasy. Fans Fantasy. Gary, close us out with a couple questions,
Just,
good ones.
just an overall question: how much do you buy into, or look? How much do you look at? Let's put it that way. The offensive coordinator and how that affects a quarterback, a running back, a receiver, etc. And they change all the time. Like you hear all these stories. Baker Mayfield has had 4 coaches and 4 offensive coordinators in the last 3 years, or whatever it is. How much do you look at that in the preseason when you go into your rankings?
That's a great question.
You do pay attention to it. I'm not going to say it's one of the first 3 things I look at in doing that, but it is important, especially in 2020, where you really didn't have a lot of time to coach, to learn new systems and to see it in a preseason game and how it all works out and to get live reps and things like that versus, anybody that doesn't know those plays. I mean, it's great to go up against your number 1 defense, but they kind of know what you're doing at the same time. So you do look at that. You look at, trees, like did they come out of
Yeah.
The Harbaugh tree did they come out of? The Andy Reid tree, and what do they believe in offensive philosophies? I think that's important, and it matters a little bit. You look at situations like that, and Baker Mayfield is a good example. It's really hard, and I'm not going to let him off the hook because he's been a colossal disappointment so far for his NFL career. But it is hard every year to come in and learn new system and learn new terminology and learn different plays. And especially this year, you have a new head coach. It's going to take time for this to gel. You know, the first live reps, real reps against somebody with really coming at you was against the Baltimore Ravens.
Right.
And it showed. And
Yeah.
it really, really showed. And it's unfair to a degree about Baker, but he's got to play better at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Final question, because the running back situation, there are so few bell cow backs, they call them, you know, that just totally dominate the running attack for that team. Because no practice, because no preseason games, because of the soft tissue injuries, how quickly, again, a general rule, how quickly do you pull the trigger on a handcuff for one of these bell cow backs? Might it get moved up this year a little bit?
Oh, it absolutely did. I moved handcuffs up 2 rounds in my drafts. And I thought this year was so important, especially a couple of the guys that have some injury history or are real, you know, bruising backs. I thought if you drafted Dalvin Cook, and I love Dalvin Cook as a player, but there are some injury history issues with that, you had to get Alexander Madison. And if that meant taking him in the 6th round, so be it. If you drafted Derrick Henry, you know, Derrick Henry is one of the most physical backs, but you know, without reps and things like that, Darrington Evans was a guy, you know, unfortunately he's gotten banged up, but he was a guy you had to have. Eckler, you had to have Josh Kelly.
Yeah.
You know, you just had to make sure you get these guys. And I just moved them up, and I suggested everybody move them up. And, you know, when you felt like, oh, it's too early to draft them, that was the time you need to draft them this time. You couldn't say, oh, I think they'll be available next round. You couldn't take that risk in your drafts this year.
Right.
And if you didn't get the handcuffs, I'm a big proponent, try to trade for the handcuff. You know, lock those people up. I get it that you can't handcuff everybody, but if you own Todd Gurley, if you drafted Todd Gurley, you had to get Brian Hill. And if Brian Hill wasn't drafted, you had to make sure that your first waiver wire move was to get Brian Hill because of the injury history. And it was really, I always like handcuffing, but it's never been more important than in 2020.
Gotcha. He's Ken Zalis of fansfantasyfootball.com, and he's available by Twitter at fansfantasy. Ken, how can people see your stuff with PressBoxOnline.com? You're in our print issues, which come out every 6-7 weeks, but how about online? And with Glenn Clark.
Yeah, you go to PressBoxOnline.com/fantasy, click on the fantasy football page. It's all there. I do 4 articles a week, including my rankings. They start on Tuesday morning, and we do rankings on Wednesday. Thursdays we do DFS lineups, and Fridays we do sleepers. And then every Thursday at 11:30 a.m. we do a live podcast, the Fantasy Football Show. Glenn Clark, KO, and myself. We have a great time answering as many questions. You can check that out live on Facebook, or you can listen to it by hitting the radio page on PressBoxOnline.com.
All right. KZ, thanks for doing this. Maybe we'll catch up in a few weeks again. All right.
Anytime, guys. Nice talking to you.
Thank you.
For Ken Zalis, my co-host Gary Stein, I'm Stan the Fan. And Monday night, Ross Grimsley and I will have the Orioles ex-general manager, Dan Duquette, joining us. We'll see you down the road. See ya.